Hi everybody, MichaelBtheGameGenie here, and today on Video Game Nostalgia, we're going to do something a little different. So today, we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 arcade games that I think should be Arcade1Up cabinets.
Goodbye.
So that's right, today we're going to be taking a look at my top 5 arcade games that I think should be Arcade1Up cabinets. Just recently, Arcade1Up announced a bevy of new cabinets during their CES coverage, and some of these can only be described as dream cabinets from the community, but there's still so many I want to see them tackle. Now also, to be clear, what I'm talking about here specifically is not just seeing these games show up on an Arcade1Up cabinet to play, but for it to be the marquee game itself that the cabinet is designed after. Now, I'm taking a blue sky approach with this list and throwing all known licensing issues and even common sense out the window to list my top 5 dream cabinets. Now with all that out of the way, let's get to the list. The minute that I saw Arcade1Up release Big Buck Hunter and knew they were tackling gun games, the first thing that came to my mind was my personal favorite gun game from when I was a kid, Terminator 2. Of course, being an arcade kid of the late 80s to mid 90s, there was no bigger gun game I remember getting released than the arcade cabinet based off the smash box office hit Terminator 2 Judgement Day. I remember seeing this awesome arcade cabinet set up in my local arcade for the first time, and everybody was circled around it, anxious to put their quarters into the machine, handle the awesome automatic weapon attached to the control deck, and find themselves traveling to the future after Judgment Day and taking down Terminators and trying to save John Connor. What is kind of funny is the game, as far as I have ever gotten, doesn't even follow the events of the movie and takes place after Judgment Day and the robot apocalypse. To be fair, they were always some of my favorite parts of the movies, so I'm totally okay with that. Terminator 2 Judgment Day is an auto-scrolling shooting game where digitized characters appear on the screen and you must shoot them all down to progress from stage to stage. The furthest I have ever made it myself is stage 3, where you are trying to defend John Connor while he is escaping in this truck, and unfortunately playing through emulation I have to use a trackball and I'm just not accurate enough yet. The real appeal to this game for me, of course, is the awesome cabinet with the guns attached. These work much differently from Buck Hunter, so maybe they don't need to use Sinden technology, but it would be cool if they could somehow include the force feedback in the guns. I know I'm dreaming with the licensing, unique cabinet shape, and different control schemes and force feedback for sub 500, but hey, I said no restrictions here, right? A faithful Arcade1Up Terminator 2 cab would certainly make a 40-year-old Mike an excited 13-year-old again. I grew up a huge wrestling fan, and I have played every possible game you can think of, and when asked what my favorite is, I can't help but answer simply Wrestlefest. You have to remember, it wasn't always awesome being a wrestling fan and gaming fan back in the 80s, and most of the licensed wrestling games were pretty generic and didn't feature finishing moves, entrances, or anything really that would make a game special. That is until Technos dropped their magnum opus wrestling game, Wrestlefest. Wrestlefest had everything I could ever dream of having in a wrestling game, starting with the wrestlers. They all looked so goddamn good. That familiar Technos graphical style showed the wrestlers in such a detailed way that we had never seen before, and the extras as they were coming to the ring, like including Mr. Perfect's towel, and I mean just so many good touches. The ring announcer Mike McGurk announcing the match, getting to participate in the first video game Royal Rumble, or chasing the Legion of Doom for the tag team titles. So much wrestling win for a young kid. Did I not mention the finishing moves? Not only did you do the moves, but you also get the signature poses and movements here. I could gush on and on about the simple but precise and great controls to this iconic cabinet. Listen, Arcade1Up, I know exactly why it's almost impossible. It's a licensing nightmare where you have to get WWE and Technos on board first. Then it's getting the rights to talent not under Legends contracts. Then it's getting WWE to agree to include some of these guys like Demolition who are in that concussion lawsuit. Literally impossible. But don't give up and don't release it until you have everyone on board and can do it right. This would probably be my absolute number one if I thought it was more possible to be released. Well, complete anyways. What? I bet you guys probably expected this to be number 1 for me, right? Well, honestly, almost any game on this list could be number 1. You can almost take the numbers and throw them away. Donkey Kong is almost single-handedly responsible for me having all these arcade cabinets in my basement at this point. Let me explain. While I certainly was drawn to the nostalgia of having these games, the true passion for having an arcade cabinet in my house came from King of Kong. I must have watched that movie about 100 times in the past 10 plus years, and seeing Steve Wiebe and Billy Mitchell duke it out for the top score in Donkey Kong is what got me originally fascinated with classic arcade culture. I left that movie dreaming of having a Donkey Kong cab in my house and playing myself crazy, also trying to become a master at the game. Then Arcade1Up came out, and maybe there is a chance. Now I have an arcade in my basement, and what certainly is missing is Donkey Kong. That iconic cabinet with the Nintendo shape in 3/4 scale needs to find a home in my arcade. One thing to be clear though, Donkey Kong is actually brutally hard. If you haven't, load up a ROM and check it out for yourself. It will punish you, so if it ever does come out, expect to be humbled right out of the gate. I know this one is a long shot because Nintendo has trust issues and literally don't need the money, but man, how cool would it be if they could pull this off? Obviously Donkey Kong will be a day one purchase for me, but it is probably the most unrealistic want in this list. Come on Nintendo, just this once, play nice with others. There is probably no game that I have only recently began playing that I have fallen in love with quicker than Robotron 2084. I have said it so many times that I grew up in the arcades of the late 80s and early 90s and missed out on so many classic arcade games. I have heard so many classic arcade enthusiasts and collectors talk about Robotron 2084 and how it was a must-have game, but from everything I have seen, I didn't get it. I mean, it looks like a pretty basic shooter game with pretty uninspired graphics in a pretty nice looking cabinet. What's so special? And then you play it with the proper twin stick controls and immediately realize this may be the greatest game ever made. I mean, it's close to a perfect experience. The colors on the screen are amazing, but be careful because they aren't far off seizure inducing, but the game just looks so good on the screen in front of you. It controls perfectly with the twin sticks, and it's one of those experiences where you feel like the controls are an extension of yourself, and you feel in the game. The action is frantic with so many enemies, obstacles, and people to rescue on the screen at once. You just feel alive playing it. I have to admit, the minute I started playing it myself, I saw exactly why all the collectors were so desperate to have this game in their collection, and why the cabinet is a must-have. I think there is a pretty good chance we may get this game on a cabinet, as John D has talked about it very recently, but I'm nervous it won't be the marquee game. This cabinet means more to arcade collectors and arcade history than a lot of people are familiar with right now, and hopefully, if you watch this video, you give it a chance and maybe join me in asking Arcade1Up specifically for a Robotron 2084 cabinet. So this would have probably been an entry on this list, but Root Beer Tapper is going to be an included game on the Midway Legacy cab, so technically we are getting Tapper on an Arcade1Up cabinet soon, so it doesn't fit. But it still kind of does, because I am sure people are excited to play Root Beer Tapper on an Arcade1Up cab, but how many of you would have lost their minds to see a dedicated Arcade1Up Tapper? With Root Beer Tapper and Timber with a 3/4 accurate recreation of the original cabinet. I'm sorry I'm not just thinking about playing the game here, but dreaming of the functional furniture. I will admit, I love how these cabinets look and would absolutely go nuts to have that Tapper cabinet stood next to all these other iconic cabinets. Let Arcade1Up know if you would buy a Tapper cabinet. And last but not least, my most desired cabinet. I'm not crazy like P-Dub. Well, maybe an ice cold beer machine, that'd be pretty cool. Anyways, for real, my most desired arcade cabinet. So I will be honest, all the other games I've put in this list, I am sure there's a bunch of people out there that will totally agree with me. But this one is just for me, and I'm sure a lot of people didn't even know there was a G.I. Joe arcade game. Well, as a kid, there was no cartoon or toy line that I was more interested in than G.I. Joe, and it's a passion that has stuck with me still to this day. So being the G.I. Joe superfan that I am, one day as a teenager, I walk into an arcade, and closer to the back, hidden away, I discovered G.I. Joe, the arcade game. Oh my god, I take a look at the cabinet art and see the awesome attract mode on the cabinet, and I was hooked. G.I. Joe is an auto-scrolling shooting game where you use a single stick to control both the character and the on-screen targeting simultaneously with the control stick and shoot with one of the buttons. It's a 4-player game where you can play as classic G.I. Joe characters Duke, Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and Roadblock with their likenesses from the Sunbow series. The gameplay is a little hard to explain, but the best way I can explain it is that it plays a lot like Space Harrier, except with a military concept. In my opinion, this is easily the closest they have ever come to emulating what it's like to be a character in the cartoon. Simply put, this is the definitive classic G.I. Joe experience for me, and I never get tired of it. The graphics look fantastic, the enemies you take on are all amazing, from Tomax and Zamout to the Baroness to even Destro, and they are all accompanied by a specific vehicle they are fighting you from. G.I. Joe product placement at its best. I know of all the games I mentioned, this one isn't in the top 50 arcade games of all time, and probably isn't even something on their roadmap. But G.I. Joe is still a very marketable brand, and retailers certainly know the name and will consider carrying it. Come on, Arcade1Up, you know you want to make it. I will do everything in my power to will this into existence. I love G.I. Joe the arcade game, and it will be the pinnacle of my G.I. Joe and Arcade1Up collection. So guys, that's my top 5 arcade games that should be Arcade1Up cabinets. What I want you to do now is let me know in the comments, do you agree with my choices, or do you like my choices and think that Arcade1Up should make these games into cabinets? Or do you disagree with me and think there are other games that deserve that opportunity first? And if so, let me know what your top 5 are in the comments below. At the end of the day, I'm just so excited to see what Arcade1Up is working on and adding even more cool games to my collection. I want to say thank you so much everybody for watching. This is Michael B. the Game Genie, and I'll talk to you next time.